We need to. Um, cool. Well, I think we'll get going then. It's nearly 5 past, so I think we can move on. So basically, welcome to our 2025 trends webinar. We thought it'd be a good way to kick off the year. I'll do a quick round of introductions, starting with myself and then our panelists, then we'll move into our first main topic. But we're going to cover stuff like leveraging AI, remote and hybrid working, skills-based hiring, mental health and well-being, and analytics. We've got a few different questions, but we'll still be chances to post in the Q&A, and we'll try and wrap some of those questions up at the end. And some of these topics are quite chunky, so we might not get through all of them. So we'll sort of see how we go. But I'm your host today. My name is Chris. I'm the partnership manager here at Teamtailor in the UK team. And as you know, Teamtailor is an applicant tracking system with a global presence and 10,000 customers. And we brought this webinar together today with some of our partners. So I'm just going to hand over to Andrew to introduce himself first. And then if you pass it over to Ruby and we'll finish up with Ben, that'd be great. And then we'll move on to the first topic. Cheers, Andrew.
Thanks, Chris. You've gone all formal now. I like that. Everybody calls me Woody, so that's probably, if anybody knows me, you've probably heard of me as Woody rather than Andrew Wood. I am the Chief Customer Officer and co-founder at Willo. We are a asynchronous candidate screening tool that partners with Teamtailor. So yeah, excited to be here. Thanks very much for having us, and yeah, look forward to sharing our thoughts on the next 12 months or so. Ruby, over to you.
Thanks, Woody. Hi, everyone. My name's Ruby Melling. I am the founder and CEO of Talentloop. My background, I've got over 10 years experience within the kind of talent and recruitment space, both agency and internal. And my experience spans multiple disciplines from kind of sales to C-suite. Identified a gap in the market a couple of years ago to help companies attract and retain the right people without it having to cost them a fortune in recruitment costs. And in the last 2 years, we've helped companies save over £500,000 in recruitment fees whilst elevating them as a go-to employer and improving culture and retention. So yeah, thank you for asking me to be part of this today. Ben, over to you.
Thanks, Ruby. Great to meet you all. So my name's Ben. I'm the founder and managing director at Bond Global. We're an embedded talent consultancy. So we have the pleasure of being embedded into a whole range of companies all over the world. So we're embedded in some of the largest and biggest brands that you will know of, right through to some of the coolest, craziest and weirdest startups all over the world. I'm dialing from Wiltshire today, so I'm based in the UK. My US headquarters are based on the East Coast in Boston, so I spend quite a bit of time out there as well. But yeah, super excited to have a chat today.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Great to have you here. It's a pleasure. Thanks for taking the time to kind of get involved in sharing your thoughts on 2025. Our first topic today is really around the shifting role of AI in recruitment technology. So that's kind of where I wanted to start. And I think, you know, Ben, I'm going to come to you first, just to kind of say what's your take, and we might have some differences of opinion, different thoughts, which is really great. But I'd be interested to know what your take of what the changes we should expect, what level and degree of change we should expect from around AI in recruitment for the coming year and a little bit beyond that.
Yeah, sure. I think you're right. Like whenever you get big change, like AI is polarizing, so you will get different views on this. And I think it's hard to have a view at the moment that's like correct because there's so much to learn still. But my view on this is if you look at over a 1 to 2 year period, I actually don't think we're going to see a huge amount of change. So I think if you looked at over a 12-month period or 2 year period, I don't think we'll see massive change in the way our TA functions are operating day to day. I think the quote, you overestimate what you can achieve in 1 year and underestimate what you can achieve in 10 years is going to be really useful to be thinking about when you're looking at AI. What I do think the next 1 to 2 years will be, though, is like extreme test and measure. So I think people will be looking at lots of tech, understanding AI and testing and measuring it over the next 1 year, maybe 2 years, to figure out what is that perfect blend between machine and human. Because the one thing you can guarantee, it's not going to be all AI, it's not going to be all human. There is a blend, but the people that get this right will be the ones that probably spend the next couple of years really figuring out what the right blend is. Because there'll be places where AI is going to be amazing, and there'll be places where it really shouldn't go. And getting that right is going to be the major thing. The only caveat to that I would say is maybe in a shorter time frame. So possibly in this year we could see AI come in a bit heavier into like inbound applications. So dealing with top of funnel, rank stacking applications, anything that touches inbound, top of funnel work, all the way through the whole process. Within reason, you could probably use AI and automation to deal with that, all of that, today. So that might be the only caveat to no change over 1 to 2 years. We might see it come into that space a bit quicker, but it's coming. In 10 years. It will be in like dominating lots of spaces, I think. But I don't see massive change over the next 12 months. I think people are going to be trying to figure out what works, what doesn't.
Interesting. So a period of testing and refining and understanding what's out there in the market. Interesting. Woody, let me come to you on that as well. So what do you think is going to be the sort of scope of change over this year and the coming years? Do you have any difference of opinion, or how are you thinking about it?
I don't know whether it's a different opinion or just sort of adding to it. Every year we run a state of hiring survey, and in our state of hiring survey and people's outlook for the next year, 53% of people said that they were looking to actually change the AI that they used last year. And then a scary statistic, or I think it's a scary statistic, 17% of the people that responded were already using AI to actually make the hiring decisions for them, which I thought was quite shockingly high, actually. The thing is, I genuinely believe that, so my sort of thesis is over the next 12 to 18 months, if I can creep 6 months extra, what's going to happen is these companies, they're going to implement it more. They're going to make more hiring decisions based on AI. And that's all fine, and sort of automate, as much of the process as possible. Whilst at the same time, candidates, and, we deal with some of the biggest companies on the planet, candidates are also using AI, but the problem is everybody talks about the AI enabled candidate. The reality is they're not enabled at all. They're all looking exactly the same. Really, really good AI technicians, they are absolutely using it to their advantage, but quite often it's just a sea of sameness, CVs looking exactly the same. And what I see happening over the next 12 months is AI for candidates gets better, AI for recruiters gets better. We see this massive implementation period where it just ends up AI assessing AI. And then in 12 months' time, people start to realize, actually, that's not really going to work for us. Candidates become like disenfranchised with the whole application process. And I think the next 6 months after that will hopefully lead to some equilibrium where we're like automating processes, yes, heavy lifting admin, but we're also keeping humans at the center of like the decision-making process. That's what I think.
Interesting. Yeah. It's a bit of a kind of grey soup at the moment, isn't it? And some of the environments with CVs.
Yeah, so, I would definitely agree with that. We hosted an event recently looking at how candidates are using AI actually. And you kind of get to the point where you think, at what point is this whole process like completely pointless? Like, what is the point? Because you've got an AI CV being screened by AI. They're using AI in the interview. And you get to the point where at what point am I actually assessing the human? And the way we're starting to design processes, you might not actually assess the human until maybe touch 5 or touch 6. Like it is a really, really interesting thing to navigate. And that's why I don't think people will be jumping in like aggressively into AI without doing a lot of testing to see what the impact is on quality and how you're assessing them and making sure that you're making the right hire still. I think it's a very exciting period, but people need to implement with caution and make sure that it's not making a detrimental impact on experience and on quality that's coming through the funnel. So yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Woody said there.
Still need to find the right candidates regardless of how you do it, right? So okay, so yeah, moving on a little bit, and just going to come to you on this one to start with, Woody, and then sort of bring Ruby into the conversation. But what trends do you think are shaping the candidates' expectations regarding communication, transparency, and feedback? Like what's impacting us there from the candidate side that's making businesses change how they do things in regards to the AI trends?
Yeah, I think The reality is that this sits across not just talent, it sits across everything people, right? Is if you look at TikTok videos, it's only 3 scrolls before I'm confronted with some sort of, redundancy chat or terrible interview experience, or here's how I used AI to complete my interview at Goldman Sachs kind of video, and all of that readily available information, and basically candidates going, do you know what, I am going to speak out about this terrible candidate experience, is upping the expectations and pressure on organizations to give a better experience to their candidates. So from that perspective, leveraging technology in order to meet those demands, that's why, to kind of conversely talk about what Ben said, I actually think that you're going to get quite a lot of panic buying this year of AI tools that people think are going to help them give a better candidate experience, give better feedback quicker, that kind of stuff. And I actually think that's why this year is going to be really tumultuous, and not necessarily like individuals being able to test and measure exactly what works and what doesn't, more like, holy moly, we need to get this in immediately, because otherwise we're going to end up on a social media stream saying that, we ghosted this candidate for the last 3 years or whatever, and we can't have that. So that's I think the expectations are rising, and companies are struggling to find the ways with smaller teams to, basically mirror up to those expectations.
Thank you. That's interesting. Ruby, I think I want to bring you into the conversation here around, candidate expectations driving how businesses behave, and get your some of your thoughts on that, if you could, for our audience.
Of course. I don't think AI will ever replace humans in the recruitment and talent process. It just can't. People are sick of speaking to robots. You go on to book a holiday and there's a chat bot that doesn't work, and people just want to speak to humans. And I think recruitment, it's all about people, right? People buy from people. And I think you can utilize AI to speed up the kind of really high effort, kind of low level admin tasks to speed things up. But I think I've seen a lot of companies completely get rid of their people teams, and they're getting rid of, people directors, etc., to cut costs and streamline. And my worry is, what I think is, they're gonna, like Woody and Ben have said, we're gonna go 100%, and then we're gonna kind of take a step back and go, actually, maybe this has caused more damage than good. I think we're at a point now in the world where I think the bar's still pretty low for candidate experience, if I'm honest with you, and their expectations. And I think employers have got an opportunity through kind of being transparent, but also nailing what the process is. The amount of clients that I speak with where they'll want to hire, they'll want to do they'll want to build a team, they'll want to scale a department, open up an office elsewhere, and they just don't plan beforehand. So really nailing exactly what that recruitment process looks like. And before you even go out to market, make sure your salary brackets are nailed on, your recruitment process, who it is that's going to sign off this role and this hire, and just set expectations out and set your stall out from day one with your candidates of what to expect. I think, obviously, we've seen in the EU now that it's going to come in, that it's going to be made illegal to not have salary brackets on job descriptions. Salaries, benefits, having that insight into the company culture, what your values are. As Woody was saying, you go on TikTok, and the other day, I'm from Manchester, there's a very well-known restaurant in Manchester that's been slated through how they treat their staff, but their external employer brand is so shiny and gorgeous. But actually what it's like underneath the hood of the bonnet and to work there, their employee value proposition, their employer brand just isn't aligned. I also think as well, I've never, more than now, and I've been doing this I was a recruiter for 10, 12 years, I've never asked me more than ever, what are the company's values and how do they show up? Just having transparency with a decal on your office wall just won't cut it anymore, and people want to understand, what are the values, because the people values and the company values need to align. I think candidates now, expectations around things like sustainability, corporate social responsibility, ESG, DEI. Candidates want companies to show, not tell. I think, we're not stupid. You might have a glossy careers page, but actually your reputation precedes you. So yeah, I think it's just all about that transparency piece and really nailing who you are, what you stand for, and then articulating that through, your messaging, your recruitment process, etc.
I think the candidate expectations around AI is like a really interesting one because I was speaking to a director of TA the other day, and as part of this event, and she was saying she did an interview, and she could see that the candidate was constantly looking to the side, obviously using AI to drive the answers. And she stopped them halfway through the interview and said, "Look, are you using AI to answer these questions?" And the candidate said, "Look, I'll be honest, I am actually, but it was for a customer service role." So she said, "Okay, okay, I'm comfortable with that. Feel free to keep using it." Because actually, if you think of a customer service person's role, they're constantly being prompted or using a script or something to drive the answers. So I think it's about, and this is the challenging thing with AI, there's lots of really sweeping statements of either it will work, it won't work. But actually, if you look at a TA function, you break it down, you can't run the same process for each area. So if you have inbound applications, and let's assume most of those will be low skill, high volume, you've got your internal movers around the business, you've got your core headhunting at mid and senior level, and you've got exec search. Every single one will need a very, 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 very different strategy, and how your candidate experience will be different through each one, and your communication and your transparency will be different for each one. Now, it might be with inbound applications, you end up with something that is fully AI. And you say, actually, we're happy for you to use AI as much as you want in the process. And we are also going to be using AI to assess you because they're coming inbound, they're interested in working at that company, and you can do a large part of that and retain the candidate experience and retain their interest because they've approached you. That might be possible. Internal movers, you might be able to do internal movers with quite heavy amount of AI and automation just to get them through the process and into the right interview. But then when you come into the outbound headhunting exec search world, you might have a totally different philosophy that says we are not using AI anywhere and we don't expect you to use AI anywhere. So it's really hard to make these calls right now. And that's why I talk about a year of at least 12 months to 2 years of testing to understand where does this work really, really, really well and where doesn't it? Now, most experienced TAs will have that gut feel right off the bat. Now they will probably know where it's going to work well and it's not, but it's going to take time. It's going to take time. It takes 6 to 12 months to buy any form of software, SaaS technology in an enterprise environment anyway. If anyone's tried selling SaaS into an enterprise environment, it's going to take you at least 6 months to sell it anywhere. Then they got to mobilize it, implement it, test it, use it. So I think it's a journey, and I think we will see it. But it's going to be different in each area. But I do think the candidate expectation piece, you just got to be really honest and say we are using AI and you could use it, or we're not using it and you can't use it, or we're using bits of it and you can use bits of it. But that's a journey, and people have got to figure that out.
I think the reality.
Sorry, yeah, I just
go on, Ruby, and we'll come to Woody.
I've had a few roles recently where I can just tell it's been written by AI, where candidates kind of been given a task and taken away. And I think, I think AI is amazing when used correctly, but I think what's really dangerous is where do we draw the line, and how do we know that they are or aren't using AI, and how can we actually assess against someone's genuine skill set? Because the other thing as well is good recruitment isn't just about hiring someone, it's about them staying and growing within your business. And if you can't assess exactly what their skills gaps are, how can you put together a personal development plan? How can you ensure they're mentored and they're trained correctly? So I think it's quite dangerous territory. And like you said, Ben, we're going to have to try and find that balance and hopefully kind of have that honesty and integrity from candidates as well of where they have maybe used AI or they haven't.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Woody, did you want to come off the back of that?
Yeah, it's all really interesting chat, and there's elements that I agree across all of it. I think the really interesting thing that nobody is really talking about or implementing into their process is how are we assessing somebody's skill to use AI? So not, we're worried about how this individual is using AI through the application process, but The reality is every job in the future is going to have some element of AI in it. So actually, if we go to Ben's point, this part, don't use AI, like, you know, we've created a test that is non, you know, susceptible to any sort type of AI test, right? But we do actually want to understand, like, how easily can you configure a great ChatGPT prompt? How well do you assimilate that information and communicate it? Like, that should be on everybody's list now. Not how do we stop people from using AI, but actually, how do I assess whether this person is genuinely brilliant at streamlining a certain process by using that technology? So I think, you know, my advice would be, like, for all of your candidates, whoever you are, you can't stop them using AI, really. And if somebody gets through a process and they have used it and you never even realized, they're probably a brilliant employee of the future, actually. So whilst we should be keeping a visual eye on it and making giving great advice around, don't look the same as everybody else by just putting in the same prompt and ending up with the same thing. Instead, use it to your advantage. How do you make it amplify your actual skills, to Ruby's point? And you know, how then as an organization are we going, well, I want to actually assess your capability with ChatGPT. What's the exercise in order to do that? And give them the opportunity. I think what candidates really need is just guidance, to Ben's point, like, where can I use it? Where can't I use it? And you know, how's that going to help me get a job at the end of this?
I think there's some really interesting points from all of you there. I'm going to move on to the next topic, but yeah, there seems to be some themes around AI, about transparency and about, you know, businesses and TA leaders driving the adoption of AI, both in terms of what technologies we're going to use, where we're going to use them, and how we're going to advise candidates on how they utilize them in the process to show their skills, right? It's not something that we need to be scared of. It's something that we need to kind of, in 2025, really try to understand so we can make the best use of it, because it is super powerful and it's going to, as we all know, it's just accelerating faster and faster. So I'm going to shift slightly now to another topic, a very, almost like a perennial favorite, I suppose, over the past kind of couple of years, but the shift to remote and hybrid working. And I'm pretty sure you've all got some thoughts on this. So I'll come to each one of you, but I'm gonna, you know, start off with Ruby, and I would like to just ask, like, how do you think the shift to remote working has impacted recruitment strategies and, like, the candidates' expectations as well? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the expectation is now that hybrid is a standard practice, where it can be. Of course, if you're, you know, working in a supermarket, for example, you can't do your job from home. So, but the majority, it's standard practice. 70% of employers now in the UK have got a hybrid working model, and 25% of these are fully remote. I think most candidates are looking for at least kind of 2 days a week from home. And the question now that we're getting from candidates is, well, why don't they offer a hybrid or flexible work? I think there's a bit of a connotation that if a business does want you in the office 5 days a week and it's pretty strict, that it's going to be a bit of a micromanaging, kind of controlling environment. I think, you know, I think some candidates feel as though if they do need to be in the office 5 days a week, they're maybe not fully trusted or kind of empowered to do their job properly. I think regarding people's expectations, this might be a bit of an unpopular opinion. I learned from being in an office. I learned from hearing people around me handle objections, etc. So I think companies need to find, if they do have remote or hybrid, what is your induction onboarding look like? What's your training and development? You know, how are you making sure that not being in the office, you've got seamless digital collaboration, you've got ways of working? Because I think, again, candidates are saying, what type of systems have people got? How do they collaborate? How do they come together? And I think when companies have got outdated kind of ways of working, they're struggling to attract talent. I had a sales director role a few weeks ago, and my candidate accepted the role, which was significantly less salary because they were offered flexibility and that hybrid environment. And I think candidates' drivers now are way different. prior to the pandemic, it was the name of the company, the brand of the company, and what salary they were getting. Now it's exactly what their drivers are. So they want a nice environment, they want flexibility, they want to be able to pick the kids up from school, and salary isn't the biggest driver. So I think for companies who are looking for fabulous staff, but maybe, you know, they're not the Googles of the world with endless pots of cash, companies can, instead of looking at salary banding, they can offer that flexibility, and they'll be able to attract, you know, that level of candidate. Because again, the drivers aren't necessarily money. It might just be that they want more time with the children or the family.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true of a lot of people that I speak to. I'm going to go to Ben next, but before I do, just really interested, Ruby, your take on the 5 days a week in the office. Is that a completely outdated concept, or is it a legitimate way of working that suits certain businesses? But like you said, the candidates are suspicious of it. Do you think that is it legitimate or not? And if it is legitimate, do you think the reason that it's frowned upon is because businesses are failing to explain why it's important, explaining to understand that that's to communicate in their employer brand, it's part of their culture, you know, it's something that's required, it's how we work. Just interested on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I've actually seen a shift. I think when everyone went fully remote, people were then just craving that human contact and those kind of like water cooler moments. I'm in the office every day, but that's because I just can't work from home. My cats jump on the keyboard, and then I go and put my washing on, and I just can't concentrate. But that's just me. I think companies, if they want great staff, they're going to have to be flexible, but also kind of be able to articulate the why. I think is super important. There's a SaaS business I work with in Manchester that are really kind of strict on 2 days a week in the office, but that's because they bring the senior leadership team together, and the senior leadership team gets that time to set strategies, whatever that is, and they've tracked that. And actually, the reason that they do that in person is because it's better collaboration, they get better outcomes, and they get there quicker. So I think if you explain the why, people are more receptive to it. But I think if it's just we're in the office 5 days a week and there's no flexibility, I think that's the issue there, because there's no give and take. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I was just wanting to tuck into that point. I was curious. Ben, coming to you now, like, how do you feel that, you know, what trends are you seeing in the shift to remote working impacting recruitment strategies and candidate expectations?
Yeah, I think it changes like the wind in terms of like what's going on, and basically everyone just goes off what happens with big tech in America. So big tech in America goes remote, everyone goes remote. Big tech announces they're going hybrid, everyone goes hybrid. Now big tech is saying they want everyone back in the office, and that's gradually starting to shift as well. So I think it's constantly changing. And I think that's one of the challenges as well. I don't think there's a right or wrong. I have a preference towards remote. That's my preference. Ruby has a preference towards in office. Not a problem, right? It's about what works for you. The challenge is companies need to be really authentic and deliberate in their actions around it. That's the challenge that I find and see. As Ruby mentioned, the kind of the compromise has been, well, let's just do remote then. We can't do 5, we can't do remote. We can't do remote, we can't do 5. Let's just do hybrid, and that's where everyone's sat. But I've got this philosophy around remote that unless you're really deliberate and you run it properly, all of the environments are shit. So if you're working for a remote company, sorry, a hybrid company, and you spend 3 days remote, those 3 days remote are probably going to be pretty crap because the company isn't investing in their remote culture. And then you spend 2 days in the office, but those 2 days in the office are probably going to be pretty crap as well because they haven't invested in the in-office culture. So what you end up is very isolated when you're remote. And then when you go in office, everyone's still on Teams calls. So you're not actually creating any environment in office as well. So I think all three are absolutely fine, but you've got to be really deliberate in your actions. So for example, and be aware of them, conscious of the decision you're making rather than just flipping between them as the trends move. So if you're going to go 5 days in office, for example, and you're looking to hire the very, very, very best, you best believe it's a really nice office. And hopefully you get in a good lunch, might even have a free gym. And that's part of the value proposition, right? It's like we're coming 5 days because we really value it, but we're going to make the experience when you're here incredible. So no Teams meetings face to face. You can use the gym, you can use the food, and we're going to collaborate, and we're going to build something amazing together. But then you've got to be conscious of those actions. If you are a business in Oxford and you go 5 days remote, you now can only hire people probably within 30-mile radius of Oxford. You are going to see a drop in the quality of the candidate that you're hiring versus remote. Like, when you're remote, you don't have to compromise on your technical bar or your culture bar, because you can hire anyone in the world. So you can say, right, my bar's here for both. I'm not going to compromise. The reality is, when you're hiring a fixed location 5 days a week, at some point you're going to have to compromise either on skill level or culture bar. And that's then when companies start to make either the wrong hiring decisions, or they start to struggle to hire the caliber they need to take them to the level that they need to. So you just got to be really conscious in that. And if you do go 5 days, you probably are going to see a drop. So what are you going to do about it? Are we going to grow our own? So we're going to hold high on culture. We're going to accept a slightly lower skills gap, but we're going to put training in place to bring them up to the level. Like, what are you going to do? But what I find is companies are normally sort of switching between them with very little deliberate actions, and therefore they can sometimes find it a bit painful. But I think this will continue to evolve and change. Definitely a shift to more people going in the office. I think that's absolutely fine. It will constantly evolve and change, but I think companies can be a lot more deliberate with what they're doing to create better work environments.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. Woody, coming to you, I'm just curious, any takes on how the shift to remote work has impacted how businesses recruit, or candidates' expectations from that obviously are higher, but interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, not loads to add, to be honest, on this subject, on what everybody else has said. I think my opinion is that it's not about where you work, it's about the flexibility that you offer. So Ruby mentioned it before, it doesn't matter whether you're remote or you're hybrid or you're in office. If you're remote and you make your people sit 9 to 5 every single day, they're not getting the flexibility they want. Just the same as, the only difference between that and being in an office is you've got an additional commute, right? So what we actually did a paper on this earlier last year, and it started out as this kind of remote work, hybrid work thought leadership piece, and it very quickly turned into, actually, it's about flexibility. It's not about where you're at. It's about the culture of, giving people the ability to be adults and make a decision that actually what I need right now is I need to go to the gym because, I've been sat at my desk for 4 hours on my own and I need to go for a run and I need to not be questioned on that. And that to me is the core of all of this, is treating your employees like adults, creating accountability to the outcomes that they deliver, as opposed to sitting and being present at your desk for, however many hours a day. Doesn't matter where that desk is. So yeah, that's my, like, I would just encourage people to not think about where it is, because actually for our organization, for example, we've got one individual who is fully remote all the time, and that's what works for her. We've got one office where we go in 2 days a week. Some of us go in more days a week because I prefer to be in the office. That's how my flexibility works. So, it's a little bit converse to Ben. I totally agree. I think if you are committing, especially to a remote only culture, that takes a lot of work to get right, or not a lot of work, but it takes a conscious amount of work to get right. I think if you're working in the other environments and trying to bring people into different areas, just think about the flexibility, and that's what's going to deliver talent to you as an individual. And there's also some great tech that helps people manage that flexibility. So think about bringing that into your stack, basically.
Cool, thanks, Woody. Just to finish off on this one before we move on to a little bit about skills-based hiring, and just check on time, because we're probably going to move into questions shortly. So if you have got questions and you're in the audience, please do post them in the Q&A. We'll wrap some of those up for the end. But Ruby, what are you seeing when you're speaking to clients in terms of best practice for recruiting and onboarding remote employees effectively, if they're going down that route, or they're hybrid and they want to make sure their remote proposition is really solid, like Ben was saying, it's not just a kind of a thing that's on paper or some days where they're not in the office? What do people need to do?
You fail to plan, you're planning to fail. I think you really need to make sure you set your stall out and you build strong foundations and you've nailed those processes. I think, as I said before, understanding what your recruitment process looks like, making sure your salary brackets are nailed, whoever's going to sign the offer off, who's going to manage the offer. But to me, the first 100 days is indicative if someone's going to stay within your business or not, and if they're happy as well. So I think making sure you're looking at that first 100 days, but also before that, if you've got a candidate on a 3-month notice period, ensure that that pre-onboarding piece is nailed. They have got enough information prior. Something that we do that works really well is kind of like candidate packs. So in the interview process, what to expect, examples of questions that you might be asked, who you're going to be meeting, more kind of meat on the bone about the business. And then again, if someone's then been offered a role, an employee pack, which is just little things like, this is when you're going to get paid, this is your benefits, etc. Giving the candidate as much / a new employee as much information as possible to make them feel as though they're part of the team before they even start. I think one of the gaps that I see is there's a lot of people managers who don't know how to manage people. And I think one of the most effective strategies that companies can bring in is actually training their staff on how to interview, how to give an offer, how to induct and onboard someone properly. Because what we've seen is a lot of companies that have grown really quickly, dependent on who their hiring manager is dependent on what their candidate and employee experience is. So I think looking at it holistically as a business, what is that process? Obviously, it's going to be different for different departments, but I think you just really need to nail your foundations, your collateral, your processes, and then it should be smooth and effective. Again, if someone has got a long notice period, just be checking in with them. It might just be a call once a month. How are things going? This is what we've got going on in the business. These are things that have changed, just to keep them as warm as possible. Because again, just because you've hired someone and you've made them an offer doesn't mean that they're starting. And I think you need to set up the candidate and employee for success, but I also think you need to set your hiring managers up for success as well, giving them really clear guidelines on what does good look like and what are the key measures of success in that induction and onboarding period. The other thing as well is I think companies overlook the probation period, and a lot of companies will let that pass. And I think that's a problem, because your probation period is a time to kind of, if there are any areas that aren't right, you can kind of nail that moving forward and set your expectations of what good looks like. I think a lot of companies really bypass the probation period, then can end up sometimes with the wrong hire or the wrong type of behaviours as well. Last thing for me as well, I think something that works really well is a communication contract. So that sounds a bit scary, but what works really well with our clients is when someone's hired, the hiring manager sits with that employee and says, okay, how do you like to be managed? How do you like to receive feedback? You might have had an argument with your wife at home. Do you want me to take you for, do you want to go for a coffee? Do you want to have a chat about it? Do you want me to leave you alone? So I think it's all about treating them, one, as an adult, but two, understanding how they like to be communicated with, how they like to be managed. And I think that sets the stall out from kind of day one, that someone doesn't feel like a number. They do feel like a human, and how they're going to be managed and dealt with is in line to them, really.
Cool. Thank you, Ruby. I'm going to spin the conversation forward, and we're going to touch on skills-based hiring a little bit, and then we'll try and get some bold predictions for the coming year from you, all of our panelists, and then try and move on to some questions. Try to squeeze a lot in just to make sure everyone gets value out of the time that we've got together. But what do you think are the most sought after skills in 2025 is the kind of key thing, and how are organizations starting to identify it and develop them? And Woody, I'm interested in coming to you first on that one.
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting question. I would come back to my point around if you're an organization not assessing for AI mastery, then you probably should be, because like I said, in the next 12 months, we've obviously seen the latest Chinese launch of whatever it's called, DeepSeek, and how quickly they are, improving the AI that's available. So that might not be the most sought after skill, but it probably should be up there as one of them. But then the other side of that coin is soft skills, communication, empathy, coachability, the ability to coach, the human side of an organization. So I think it's a real interesting next 12 months where you're going to have one side, which is the technical capability of leveraging AI and aggressively implementing that into your business. And then the other side of aggressively keeping the whole company human centric so that people don't start, becoming disenfranchised with the company that they're working for. Those to me are the two kind of skills that I think we will see outside of like the hard skills that are obviously, developers and that kind of stuff that we've all been wonderfully dealing with over the last few years. I think they're the ones that are going to bubble to the top.
Really interesting. So it's balancing those two things out, that technical skill that everyone needs to have going forward to use AI, and also being able to speak to people and work as a team and collaborate is a key priority for businesses. That's that's useful. I feel like that I'm in that position myself where I'm trying to, grapple and understand AI and utilize it effectively, but also, keeping very close contact with my team while I'm remote, being human through digital collaboration, but also spending time with people. So it's very much aligned to kind of the landscape that I live in my role. Ruby, what are you seeing customers asking for or wanting to find at the moment? And what do you think they'll be looking for more into 2025?
I think companies just crying out for strong leadership skills. I mean, I'd love to actually see people. I'd love to get a hands up. But if you are a people manager, have you had people management training? A lot of companies, we call it taking your best player off the pitch. A lot of companies will have a fabulous employee who's great at what they do. They'll make them a manager, but then they won't give them any tools or resources or training around how to manage people, how to have difficult conversations, what are measures of success, etc. So I think companies are really crying out for strong leadership, and also articulating what different levels mean in terms of an SLT is there to drive the business forward and look 3 to 5 years ahead and look at that strategy. An SMT is there to take that and make it happen with their team. And what we're seeing a lot of is, because that's not clear of who's responsible for what in a business, especially with fast growth businesses, it goes straight to the top, straight to the founder, straight to the SLT. Everyone's then dragged back down into day to day, and they spend time working in the business instead of on it. So I think the biggest thing for companies is that strong leadership skills, strong management skills, but then also being able to do that remotely as well is an even kind of tougher challenge. So we spend a lot of time working with our clients on ensuring that, people know how to manage, and also what can they say and can't they say as well. So yeah, companies really want strong leadership, because if not, it just all goes to the CEO.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. And often, like, strong leaders or accidental managers, as I've sometimes heard they refer to, who want to become strong leaders, need soft skills. So I mean, how do employers identify and evaluate soft skills effectively during hiring? Like, what do you think are some of the key tools to use there, Ruby?
I think for me, it all goes down to kind of your values as a business and what that means and how that shows up in your work environment. And I think when it comes to soft skills, asking questions around, if this was to happen, how would you deal with that, etc. I think in-person interviewing, where possible, I am a fan of, because over a screen, you don't kind of get that energy from someone. I think it's quite hard to get your personality across over kind of purely a screen, but I appreciate that's not the case for a lot of people that are fully remote. One thing that I really like is kind of color profiling. kind of your reds and your yellows and your greens and your blues and what that means. Not to put somebody in a box, but to see how maybe they do communicate. So if you're a red, for example, I'm a red, you'd send one sentence. If you're a green and you're really in the detail and you're very analytical, you might send a big email. Understanding kind of what your staff are will help them when they come to communicate, when they come to manage, when they come to lead. And yeah, I found that really helps in the interview process, understanding kind of someone's color profiling.
Cool. Thank you, Ruby. And Woody, around, evaluating, measuring soft skills, obviously your platform deals with, video. Could you talk to us about how you think businesses could do that? What some of the trends that might be changing in 2025 that they could leverage to identify soft skills?
Yeah, so I think you need to think about skills in two sort of distinct, this is my opinion, and I did work in recruitment, for those in recruitment, before tech. So for 11 years, in fact, doing skills-based assessment days, that kind of stuff. So what we run a skills-based workshop, and we kind of put things into two categories. One is skills that you want to identify at scale, so you know whether somebody is directionally correct, whatever that means. But basically, they're not a yes or a no at that point. I'm willing to, and I need to invest more in this individual to understand, their skills in depth. So there's two things that you need to do. One is, if you're getting 14,000 applications and they all look the same on CVs, somehow you've got to understand the basics, qualities, behaviors, skills that you want that individual. So whether that is communication skills using a tool like ours, or whether it's cognitive capability using a tool like Arctic Shores or something like that, that's going to give you that kind of baseline of, yes, this person's directionally correct. And then to Ruby's point, I absolutely love face-to-face interviews, but at the very least, you want to split your interview into two. One is the kind of cultural questions and cultural fit side of things that, Ben talked about, the cultural levels and the technical skills. So how can I assess this person's fit within our business and how we like to run the company? And then secondly, how can I give them a 30-minute task that is basically their job? So I believe in 90% of roles, you can do something practical that demonstrates skill. Obviously, it's a lot easier for me, like recruiting into sales, because I just do role plays and then I test their coachability and then listen back and watch them do it again. But if you can think about, okay, what questions do I want to ask first and foremost as a hiring manager, and then secondly, what's the actual task? And that's important for two reasons. And I'll wrap up really quickly. One is you actually see demonstrated skill in what they're going to be doing day to day. But then two, the candidate sees what they're going to be doing day to day. So they're actually leaving with a view of, this is a boring job. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to, self-remove from this process. Or they're going, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. My expectations have been managed perfectly and I know what I'm going to do day to day. And that becomes the adult contract, if you like. When that person joins, you say, well, we demonstrated what you were going to do. Now we're going to hold you accountable to that exact task on a day-to-day basis. So the more you can do that, the better.
Cool. Thanks, Woody. Okay, I'm going to move us on to our last kind of main kind of topic before we try and squeeze in one or two questions from the audience. Really hot takes. Starting with you, Ben. Give me one bold prediction. Give me and the audience one bold prediction for 2025.
Unmute. I wasn't prepared for this. I didn't know this one was coming up.
Okay. Surprise
one
question.
bold prediction. Okay. My bold prediction is that actually, and this might sound really boring and not overly inspiring, but I actually think a huge amount's going to change this year. So my prediction for this year is to use it as a year to build as much capability, process, infrastructure, culture. I would use this as a year of testing, understanding, and getting yourself ready for 2026. Now, that sounds pretty boring, right? And almost writes off a whole year. Don't do that. Let's be aggressive as possible. Let's be as positive as possible, as much fun as possible in 2025. But I don't think we'll see any seismic shifts in technology or market over the next 12 months. So I think it's what a great opportunity, right? To spend a year to really understand what the future is going to look like. Because believe me, there's big change coming, like monster change coming. So it's going to get busier. There's going to be big change. There's going to be transformational stuff happening. But I don't think it's necessarily going to happen this year. I will caveat that slightly with we're seeing definite upturn in the USA. We're definitely seeing venture capital coming back a little bit. We're definitely seeing moves in the market. But I'm not sure it's going to be like we're off like a rocket and everything's gone crazy again. So that would be my not very bold prediction, but hopefully a relatively accurate prediction.
Realistic one, yeah, maybe.
I think it feels bold to say that. To me, it feels bold. Interesting.
Cool. Well, coming to you, Woody, then next, if that's to maybe counterpoint or have a different take, or what's your bold prediction? We can maybe come back to this in a year's time.
Well, I've got a few, but the problem is you asked for one. But there's a question in the question deck about DEI priorities.
Yes.
And sadly, this was my prediction for last year. It's just taken a bit longer than I thought it would. The abundance of talent has led to companies like Meta, big organizations, the US government scrapping DEI priorities and schemes. And the reality is that's driven by, individual organizations, but it's also driven by the abundance of talent. So the more talent that you have, the less you have to appear that, you're conscious of DEI initiatives, essentially. So I think, sadly, I think that's gonna filter into more organizations over the next 12 months. I really hope it doesn't, but I think it probably will. The other two predictions are that I think we'll just see a death of the CV altogether. It will have a complete irrelevance for any application going. And then finally, I think by the end of this year, after this kind of tumultuous AI implementation that I've talked about, I think you'll see more actual government policy around AI and recruitment, forcing the hand of a more ethical standpoint when it comes to using AI and recruitment. So I think they're probably the three things I would put my hat on.
And thanks for picking up some of that DEI discussion we were having in the pre-call, because I know we weren't necessarily going to get to all of that today. So that's a really good one just to touch on for the audience. Ruby, one hot prediction, bold prediction for 2025, if you can share what you think there. I know it's hard to distill that down.
Only one.
Yeah, I know.
Just very quickly on the DEI standpoint, I think companies have got an opportunity this year to create safe spaces for their employees. Yes, Meta has abolished the DEI program, but Apple have actually shared to their shareholders that they won't be doing that, and they've actually highlighted all the companies that have done it and the importance of DEI. So yes, I think there's going to be a downturn with some businesses, but I actually think some businesses have got an opportunity to attract fabulous people with these DEI initiatives, because when it comes back around, which it will do because it has to, everyone will remember the people who got rid of it.
Yeah.
In regards to my prediction for this year, one, I don't think there's going to be massive scale, kind of in Ben's point. I think companies this year are focusing on retention. They're focusing on the people that they've got internally and how they can build more capabilities and future-proof their teams. I think the biggest thing we'll see this year, kind of with TikTok and kind of all the social media platforms we've got, more people are going to be calling out bad behavior. More people are going to be calling out poor experiences, poor candidate experience, and having a glossy recruitment marketing campaign and a shiny employer brand and careers page just won't cut it anymore. So if your employer brand doesn't match your true employee value proposition, you pooped. I think so. Yeah, I think what's really important is you doing what you say you're doing on the tin, because if not, all you've got to do is go onto Glassdoor, Google, YouTube, TikTok, and you've got someone there talking about how horrific their experience was. Now, you've got to take that with a pinch of salt, because sometimes you do get disgruntled employees. If you've got multiple people saying the same thing, people are going to start believing it. So instead of spending, thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on your recruitment marketing, look at your internal environment, and also employee generated content gets like something like 600% more engagement than company generated content. And if you look after your people, they're going to tell people about it. So stop caring so much about what you look like externally, treat your people well, and they'll help you drive your business and your brand forward.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ruby. I don't want to run us over time because I know it's like we get halfway through and people are like having to leave for next meetings and stuff. So, and we answered one of the questions which I was going to pick up, the Q&A, which is around D&I. So great, we were able to get some feedback on that. The other question we had was around, relying on AI too much and losing basic skills, but we're not going to have time to cover that today. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you panelists, you've been great. Thanks for joining the conversation. The recording will be going out in the follow-up email, so don't fret if you want to review or catch up afterwards or share it with your friends. We do these webinars quite regularly with lots of great panelists, so please do check back with our website and our marketing team to join our mailing list and find out more about that. Check out these guys on LinkedIn, connect with them, please, connect with me, and thank you for your time and have a great rest of the day. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.